So you want the bad news or the bad news? So if you can see on each one of these posts, the wear.
Those aren't supposed to be ridged?
No.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Chaseontwowheels here for another episode of Wrecked Bike Rebuild Garage with my buddy Brian over here. In today's episode, we are going to be working on our CBR 600 engine. We are going to be replacing the old clutch that's in the engine. It's got like 40,000 miles on it, and we're already here. So there's no way we're going to be sending out this beautiful engine in the race body that it's going to be in without a brand new clutch. Now, if you guys have no clue what Wrecked Bike Rebuild Garage is, this is our show where we take wrecked bikes, turn them into dream bikes, and we actually give them away. If you'd like to be one of those people that gets the motorcycle after we finish it, or if you just want to support the show, top link down below, Wrecked Bike Rebuild Garage over on Patreon. We would not be able to do this show without those people that support us. So if you enjoy this content, if you get some sort of information from it, which you will, consider it. If you guys have never seen these episodes before, we would not be able to afford to do the amount of work we're doing on the 600 engine or our 1000 engine if we didn't get hooked up by our boys over at Revzilla. If you guys don't know, Revzilla, they have OEM parts. A lot of people don't know they have OEM parts. So we have all of the OEM clutch parts that we need to replace this engine's clutch. Now, Brian's gonna explain what an OEM clutch is and all the pieces. Thank you, Revzilla, for supporting the show because, Lord, we wouldn't be able to do it without you. Okay, Brian, what's up?
Here is our pile of clutch out of the bike. These are the main pieces in your clutch that would wear. So there is one more part in your clutch that has a possibility of wear. We have not taken our clutch apart to inspect it, but this is your typical wear items for your clutch. You have the springs. On this particular machine, there's 5 springs in it. These are your clutch friction plates, and you see I have them set out in 3 different piles here. There's actually 3 different style of clutch plates that go in this engine. So one is the first plate, one is the last plate, and then the rest of them go in between. So we'll get to that later when we start the installation. These are all of the driven steel plates. These things over time will get overheated, or they'll get buffed to like a real high shine from clutch slip, and then they don't get a real good grab on them. So we're going to be replacing these. This is the throwout bearing. This is the bearing that sits in the center of your clutch assembly. So when you operate your clutch lever and your clutch opens and closes, this is the bearing that everything rides on. So we'll explain that a little bit deeper when we have everything apart and we can explain it. And then these last 2 parts right here this is just a flat, they call it a seat, just a flat steel O-ring or flat steel washer. And then this one is slightly different. You're not going to be able to see it on the camera, but this is a concave spring. So it's not totally flat, it's bent up on the edges. So this actually adds just a touch of pressure to the entire pack at all times, so you don't hear it rattling around inside your engine while you're sitting there with the clutch pulled in. So we're going to replace these as well. They also suffer from weakening from heat. So these are all of our clutch parts. This is our engine. Time to put them in.
So Brian, I imagine step 1 is remove the case cover so we can get access to the old clutch.
Yes.
We have not seen the original clutch that's in this engine yet, so we're going to kind of experience that with you guys. So I think we should remove a case.
Hopefully there's nothing scary in there. There it goes. Okay, so this is the throwout arm for your clutch. When you pull your clutch lever and the cable comes down and it hooks onto this arm, And the cable pulls this arm this way inside, and pulls everything apart inside the clutch. We could look at it a little bit later. To remove the cover, this one actually has a gasket sealer on it, so it's a little bit more difficult than your typical clutch cover. But once you break the seal, which I did using a tool like this to pry, which I probably shouldn't have used, but this cover is getting replaced, so I'm not too concerned. And a hammer, we got the cover to break from its seal, and now we could just take this arm and turn it away from the engine. And if you could see, it just opened up that gap a little bit more.
At the risk of making a bad joke, that technique is clutch.
That was a bad joke.
I feel good about it, though.
So, here's your clutch cover, okay? This is the throw-out pin. So this arm right here, it goes all the way around this way. This arm hooks over the end of this pin, and I can remove this to show you. So this pin comes through the cover and hooks onto the end of this rod right here, just like that. And then when you pull the clutch lever, it pulls this arm this way, and this little piece of the arm rotates and pulls this pin out towards the cover. Pulls, this is your pressure plate that I spoke about earlier, pulls the pressure plate this way, and it releases all the pressure in between all of the stacked discs in your clutch, and then the friction goes away, so your clutch releases, which allows you to change gears. This cover houses a few things. The clutch arm, there are also 2 holes right here that are cast and machined into this cover. These are points for these 2 rods. This is for the starter, and this is an idler gear that comes down to the crankshaft. These 2 rods are now supported by the inside of this cover, so when everything's spinning, they're not just loosey-goosey flopping around in there, and everything stays where it's supposed to. Pretty important, obviously important cover. There's a lot going on in here. This particular cover, not all Hondas are like this, not all inline 4 cylinders are like this, but on this half of the cover, so this is the clutch side, this is actually the reluctor. I'm gonna dumb that down for you in a minute.
Thank you, Brian.
So the reluctor, if you can see, has all these little nipples that stick up. This is what tells the ECU where the crankshaft is.
Oh.
So each one of these comes past this little sensor right here, and it's just a little magnetic sensor. So all it does is there's one of these that's shorter than the rest. So that one drop in impedance in between tells the ECU where the crank is at. So that's how your engine knows when to fire each spark plug.
The lack of data coming through.
Yes, the break in data. The break in data is what triggers the firing order.
I feel like all engines are built on lots of tiny, very simple things.
Yes.
Everything is just done minutely, like in its own little thing.
Absolutely. So most of these parts in a car engine would be separate pieces.
But this is trying to conserve space.
So when you're in a motorcycle, you want to put everything in as small a package you can make it.
Right.
So what they do is they use very simple ways of doing things that they can make very small.
Right.
And they just incorporate them into the power plant.
Gotcha.
You know, if you're talking about a car world, your engine, one part. Okay. Your clutch, or if you have an automatic, your bell housing is a separate section.
Okay.
And then your transmission is a separate section.
Everything is in one.
This is all of it right here.
Right.
Okay. And then your ignition system is bolted out onto the top of the engine. Now it still gets its signal from something rotating in the engine very similarly, but it's bolted to the outside instead of putting it internal inside the engine. When you don't have a lot of space and you're trying to make everything as light and as compact as you possibly can, you make it all really small and you put it all in one package. So the crankshaft drives the valve train, the clutch, the ignition system, and the charging system is all run off of the crankshaft. So everything is powered off of the crank. So the crank is obviously also what transmits all of the power. So, and then it also transmits power, you know, and turns that power into motion. So, I mean, all these things are all connected to this one shaft. Actually, I have a little tiny one over here, and I'm going to show it to you. This is a single piston or a single cylinder crankshaft. This one has pretty much 4 of these all lined up. So as the piston's up and down, we've been through this, as it up and down, and the crankshaft rotates, and it turns all your rotating power. So something like this is inside of here, and this whole assembly is pretty much bolted to the, actually it's probably more like this end, bolted onto the end of the crankshaft, and everything gets driven off of it. Okay, so that is everything that is behind our clutch cover. Right now, we're going to focus on our clutch from here on out. So the reason why you release these a little bit at a time is these are actually steel bolts are bolted into the aluminum basket.
So steel stronger than aluminum. You don't want to damage the aluminum.
So you don't want to put any sideways tension because everything is sprung. There's spring tension on everything. If you start removing one at a time or loosen one side at a time, puts a lot of uneven strain on this cast piece of aluminum, which doesn't flex very well. And there's a good chance that you could crack it.
Okay.
So especially the posts that each one of these bolts are screwed into.
Right.
Each one of those posts are the weak point in this system. If you were to loosen one of these at a time, that's what you could break. And that's part of the main basket of the clutch, which is the most expensive part.
So don't F your S up.
You don't want to, you definitely don't want to damage the pressure plate or the basket or the hub of your clutch. Those are the really, really expensive parts.
Yeah, we don't need any more expensive issues.
No. You may want to come take a look at this, Chase. You may not have seen one of these yet.
Oh, exciting.
Okay, so you could see these little nipples from these clutch friction plates that are inside of here, right?
Yeah.
It's the same little nipple in here. Now, when you set these into the clutch or into the housing, these nipples are usually lined up with each other.
Right.
Okay, now you can see this one right here at the end is not lined up with the rest. So this is that one special plate.
Got it.
That goes at the end.
Okay.
That fits in this groove instead of this groove. Okay, so this is our pressure plate. This is the throwout pin. This is the throwout bearing. When this whole thing is together, so when that clutch rod pulls, like I showed you before, it pulls this pressure plate this way against all the spring tension. When this is pulled out here, this whole thing that's rotating is rotating on this bearing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this bearing does wear.
Right.
Okay, so instead of replacing the clutch on a 40,000+ mile engine and just doing the frictions and steels, we're also going to do all the other wearable parts, which would be this bearing. And then behind all this, I showed you before, the seat and judder spring and all our fibers and steels. So I just wanted to show you that one last plate gets installed offset from the rest. But it's just good practice that every time you remove a clutch, you take it out the same way, put it back in, same way.
Got it.
I'm gonna need a pick, please. Oop, they're all stuck. Hold on, I might get lucky. I get lucky, get lucky. Lucky, lucky. Yeah, look at that. The whole thing came out all stuck together.
What an exciting moment.
I love it when that happens.
I apparently do too now.
Okay, so here's this last friction plate that is different than the rest as well. Okay. That's our clutch pack. It actually looks like it's in fantastic shape.
So that was the little spacer guy, right?
That was the judder spring.
Judder spring.
And the one that I'm hopefully going to get out of here now. Can you grab me a thin flathead screwdriver?
Yes.
I just need to... There we go. Never mind. It came free. I got it.
Would a jud tool have worked?
No, not sharp enough.
Oh, it needs to be sharp. Got it.
So this is the seat, and that's the judder spring. If you could see that little gap between the edge of the two rings. Yeah. Okay, so there's a gap on this side, but if you look at it from the inside edge, they're touching. So that's because this piece is not flat. So it's a concave washer, or technically it's a spring, and then one sits inside the other. The part that sticks out on the outside edge touches the clutch plates.
Ah.
This would go in first. This would go on top of it with the outside edge facing you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little rundown on the rest of the clutch that's in here.
Okay. This thing wiggled when you did that. Are we fighting? Fight turning?
That's perfect, actually.
What am I doing?
So as you're turning that, it's going to turn the center of the clutch basket.
Oh, so so this is the front sprocket that I'm rotating
Yes.
right now.
So pretty much how this works, as Chase is showing us right now, the crankshaft spins the outer basket. The outer basket transfers that power through the clutch pack and spring tension to the inner basket, and the inner basket is what drives the clutch.
So
Or what drives the transmission. Friction is what drives the transmission, yes.
That's a lot of power just to be translated through some friction.
So here is our pressure plate. This was the other part that I was saying that will get replaced more often than the rest of the clutch setup. Sometimes when you burn up your clutch pack, it will do damage to your pressure plate as well, and it'll score this edge. It'll overheat it. I've seen them actually, from getting so hot, start to crumble.
Holy shit.
Like they've been melted. And like aluminum doesn't just like liquefy, it like breaks into dust before it liquefies. So I've pulled open engines where the pressure plate, you pull the cover off and like half of the pressure plate is left. It's just the whole outside edge of it here has just been crumbled to dust. You always want to, just clean off this edge real quick and make sure there's no gouges or scratches or it's not discolored in any way or any of that stuff. Just give it a good look real quick. Everything looks good and your pressure plate is reusable. We are going to start with installing the bearing back in the pressure plate.
So what's the oil for? Just to...
So I never ever put a bearing in anything that's dry.
Okay, ever.
Ever.
Period. Got it.
Unless the bearing for some reason is supposed to be dry, like it's ceramic, and ceramic bearings don't get any sort of lube.
Okay.
If it's anything other than that, it gets lube. All right. Throw out bearing back in the center. It's not going to go in unless it's perfectly flat. So we're just going to find that happy spot, and it just drops. Boop! As soon as you center it, it just drops right in.
Okay.
And then our pin. And we're just going to set that aside. Now we move on to
Reassembly.
reassembly.
We're
of the
officially in
clutch.
reassembly mode.
We are.
Okay. All right, Brian. Hit us with your best shot.
We were discussing wearable parts, and these are the normal wearable parts in your clutch.
You're correct.
And we also mentioned that there is possibility to wear our pressure plate,
We did.
and our pressure plate is in good shape.
Thank God.
The rest of the clutch parts are also wearable, but they tend to wear much slower than everything else.
Okay.
Our inner basket is showing some pretty significant signs of wear.
I will come over there and join you.
Yeah. Okay, so remember I was talking before that the bolts and the springs bolt into these fingers that stick out. These are the fingers I was referring to.
Okay.
Stack goes in, pressure plate goes on, spring goes on, tightens down onto this post.
Right.
Okay, so this spring actually rides on this little post that's here.
Okay.
So if you can see on each one of these posts, the wear.
Those aren't supposed to be ridged?
No.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. That's what happens when you over tighten those center bolts. So somebody probably replaced the clutch maybe a couple of times over its lifetime. That pressure plate has probably been replaced once because it's in such good shape, but when they drove those bolts on at the ends of the springs,
So those
they probably just drove them on with
there,
like a little mini
what?
impact. And just, that's all it takes. Aluminum is way softer than steel is. So on these fingers right here, there's these ridges in here, and these ridges are not supposed to be here. I don't know if you could see this one right here. This is smooth. So this is the outside edge that is smooth. But if I bring this same one back around here, you could see that this side of it is also grooved. So pretty much what you're looking at, if you think about it, is this thing is spinning at thousands of RPMs. These springs are flung to the outside. When they're flung to the outside, I could do it like this, you could actually see it. When they're flung to the outside, the springs move up against these pins. So as they're in there, engine is vibrating while it's running. It's not perfectly smooth. Just the even when they're under tension, the vibration while they're up against that leaves these grooves in here over time. Obviously, the deeper the grooves are, the weaker these pins get. Right. And once they get to a point where you can, feel them,
you can definitely feel
you
those.
want. Oh yeah, these are horrible. You could play these like an instrument. They're so deep. It's time to replace this inner hub. To remove this inner hub, we're going to need to unspike this center nut. You see right here, it's been divoted. So we need to open that divot and then take off this center nut, and then we can remove this center basket to replace it.
We don't have a center basket, do we?
We do not. We do not have a center basket.
All right, well, we'll be able to take people through the whole process up to there.
Yay! Welcome to the wonderful world of motorcycle mechanics.
So guys, we hold a lot of, I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is. We do a lot of work in a way that a lot of people don't. We do
a lot of work in a way that most people do, just not most people on the internet.
We do work in a way that most people do in real life, but never do in a show.
Correct.
This is one of the examples of why shows don't do this.
Right.
We take you guys live through because that's how y'all do it. These shows, there's a team of people that comes in, does the shit, and then the host comes in and is like, oh, we're going to do the shit, and it gets done.
Yep.
This is real life shit. So this is going to stop us from being able to fully assemble this clutch.
Correct.
Because, again, we value our product and we're not going to put...
I wouldn't let you put that back together like that.
So it's that bad. Like, that should be...
I would not feel good giving this clutch back to anyone. If somebody walked in to my shop with a stack of clutch parts like we had and said, I want my clutch replaced. Mm-hmm. And I pull their bike up on the lift and I take their clutch cover off and disassemble their clutch and find that basket, that bike isn't going anywhere until that basket gets replaced.
So it's that level of it. Okay.
So let's look at it this way, just from a what-if scenario point of view.
Right.
We put this clutch back together.
Okay.
And we fully assemble our bike and we give it away.
Yes.
And the guy or the gal that gets this thing takes it and rides it for 5,000 miles. Mm-hmm. Not one single issue. And the one day they decide that they're going to do a whole shot from a light or do a clutch up wheelie or even just rolling on the highway and downshift a couple of gears and just grab a handful and one of those posts snaps off.
Would that ruin?
So now that piece is in there, not where it's supposed to be, doing thousands of RPMs up against the inside of that clutch cover.
That's just recipe for chaos.
From that point, stuff goes bang. Now, when you're on a motorcycle and stuff internally and the engine goes bang, it's not a fun ride. It's kind of like riding a 400-pound, 100-mile-an-hour bucking Bronco. It's going to do all kinds of stuff that it has never done to you before. And if you're lucky enough, you can make your way out of it without crashing.
I want to be clear on something. I'm not asking you this to get around replacing it. I'm asking you this so that people can understand if they
Don't
saw
put that back in.
Right.
Whatever you do, if you open up your clutch and you find grooves like this on the fingers, or not only the fingers, there are other spots on the outer part of the basket that do wear. This one's fine.
Right.
If you find grooves in the outer or inner basket anywhere, don't put the clutch in. Just don't.
Okay.
Do yourself a favor. I mean, if you're stranded out of state and you can only afford, and that's all they have right now to get you home is to put those clutch parts back in, okay, I get it. But if you could help it at all, my suggestion to anybody out there for safety's sake is don't put it back together.
Right. So
You could get lucky enough and it won't break, but I'm not willing to take that risk.
though, yeah.
Not with my life, and especially not with anybody else's.
Right. As far as right now for us, we have the old clutch out. We have the new clutch, half the new clutch opened. What is your suggestion for how do we put this on a pause pattern?
So these are already removed, stacked in the right order. Just wrap it with a piece of string or wire or something like that. I wouldn't use tape because you're going to leave residue.
Okay.
But something on here that's not going to contaminate these.
Okay.
Stick them in a plastic bag, put them back in
With everything?
with everything else, set them aside, slide the cover back on your engine so nothing else gets inside of it, and let it sit.
Well, let's do that real quick, and then before we end this episode, we'll jump on Revzilla, grab the inner basket, and we can show you guys how we grab stuff off Revzilla. It's super simple.
Now that we are here, I would like to take this inner basket out and make sure that there's nothing else behind it going on too.
Yeah, in case we need to order anything else.
Yep. All right, well, we're replacing this basket, so I'm gonna do some shit that you should never do to it to get it off.
At least you said it. Brian, against my better judgment, could you explain what you're about to not, quote unquote, not do?
So I need to hold the center basket still while I knock this nut loose.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to use these very fragile studs that are inside of this clutch basket.
That are already screwed.
We are replacing the basket, but there's a chance that I'll break them. So
Okay.
if you ever want to use your inner basket again, you really don't want to do this.
So how much did you say the inner basket was, Bo?
60-something bucks.
61.
Should we go ahead and grab the pressure plate, or do you
It's
feel
perfect.
super solid with that?
No, this thing is perfect. There's
Okay.
no reason to spend any money on that. That thing looks brand new.
Cool.
We already
The outer is like 220.
Yeah. I thought the inner basket would be pretty close to that as well.
So not too bad. It's only 60 extra bucks.
We're going to get new ones of these too.
What are those?
So these are thrust washers.
Oh, okay.
It's another set that are behind the hub. So, there's this one too.
Do you recommend us just grabbing all of it?
We may as well. I don't think they're going to be very expensive.
Okay.
But this is the stack of the washers that goes behind the inner basket. There's a thrust washer. And then this one is a little concave, so it puts pressure on it. So nut, washer, there's 2 washers behind the nut, and then the washer behind the basket, or the inner basket, and then the inner basket. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces we need. So this engine is packed so tightly that the only way to get the clutch basket out of it is to pull the center spacer and bearing out of it, so you can slide it over sideways a couple millimeters to remove it.
Jesus.
That's how tightly packed this thing is in here.
Boom.
So I already got this bearing, it's in the bin.
Okay.
So we had to take it apart this far anyway.
Awesome.
I totally forgot I got that bearing.
Okay, so we're gonna get that thing ordered. And is there anything else we can do to kind of prep ourselves up for the reinstallation of the clutch?
No, not really. I think we're pretty much good here.
All right, a semi-uncompleted day. When you told me that that is supposed to be smooth, I was like, well, we're f***ed.
Feel the top of that,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay, so I think the important part about situations like this is that you really get a feel for what can happen on bikes. You know what I mean? Like,
They can go bang!
yeah, like, because, no, legitimately, those are so bad. If I would have opened this up, I would have thought those are guides for the springs. I would have legitimately thought like, oh, those are to make sure the springs stay
where
the
they're
same,
supposed to be.
which makes absolutely no sense. But having not that level of knowledge that you do, I'm really happy that that happened to us. Like we tell you guys all the time, we like when stuff happens to us because we get to show you guys when something like that happens, how do you react to that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
So-
also what you're looking at.
Exactly.
Like you said, you'd be like, oh, well, there is a cool, they hold the springs in place.
Yeah.
You know?
Because that would make sense to me. So if you guys got to the end of the video, we appreciate you. Outro crew, what up? Make sure to hit that like button, guys. It really helps us, helps the show out. Brian, thank you for taking us through that. Unfortunately, we didn't get to put the new clutch in, but that kind of stuff happens. Guys, if you enjoy our 600 build, we do have a 600 playlist because, you know, we got the 1000, the 300, and the 600. It does get a little confusing. It gets confusing for us too. That's why we try to stay as organized as possible. But for you guys, we have made a playlist for each individual bike. Typically, we have a Wrecked Bike Rebuild season playlist, but that doesn't really work out for this season because we're idiots and decided to do 3 bikes at one time. So if you guys want to get a chance to win any of the 3 motorcycles that we're rebuilding, or just to support the show so you guys can help keep this show running, top link down below, Wrecked Bike Rebuild Garage over on Patreon. Would be phenomenal to have you supporting. You also get a lot of extra content over there. So that's all we got. I'm Chaseontwowheels. It's Brian. That's Team Behind. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for supporting the show. Goodbye. Outro crew. Outro crew, how many of you guys saw that and didn't think anything? How many of you guys saw the inner clutch basket and were like, okay, cool, we're gonna take that apart before Brian said anything? We'll see you on the next one.
I don't listen all the time. I wait in standby mode until you say, hey,
Bitch, shut up.
which checkup would you like? Security or privacy?
None.
Okay, would you like me to read our most recent conversations? Or learn more about privacy at Google? Or stop?
Delete all conversations.
Okay, bye.
That's right, that's right.